Hi guys, it's Jessica with Southern Sparrow. Today we're talking about the National Mah Jongg League card. So first, let's understand a little bit about what the National Mah Jongg League card even is. So the National Mah Jongg League is the organizing body for American Mahjong. They were founded in the 1930s by a group of Jewish women who wanted to make sure that there was a standardization of rules for playing American Mahjong. So they put together the standard rules for how we play American Mahjong, and each year they come out with a brand new card. This is the 2024 card from the National Mah Jongg League. And on each year's card, those are the hands that you play in American Mahjong for the year. Now the card comes out in April, so the 2024 card is played for the year from April 2024 until the new card is released next year, April 2025. So each April, the new card comes out. Why is that different? In Chinese Mahjong and in other variations of the game, they have standard hands that are kind of memorized, and those are the hands you play forever. In American Mahjong, we play from a standard set of hands each year, and every time a new card comes out, it kind of resets the playing field for everyone. So maybe you're brand new to the game and you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, and you're kind of feeling like when you play your friends who have been playing for longer than you, you're not winning as much as you'd like to be. But in April, all of a sudden, all those friends who've been playing for years, they're starting with new hands too. So that's your opportunity to really come in and start at the same place as all your girlfriends who've been playing for a long time and get to know the card together. So let's talk through how to play this card and what all of these different colors and numbers and everything means. I think when you first get this card as a new player, it can feel super overwhelming. You open it up and you're like, this is not the game for me. It is. Just bear with me for the next few minutes while we talk through how to read and understand the card, and you'll feel so much more comfortable playing it. So let's talk through a few things just to kind of start out. I think first of all, you'll notice all the different colors on the card. So you have red, you have green, you have blue. And I think it's very easy for new players to assume, oh, green must mean bam, red must mean crack, blue must mean dot. That kind of aligns with the colors on the tiles. And we just talked about the tiles in the last video. So if you didn't watch that, go back and watch that. But it's actually the colors on the National Mah Jongg League card do not relate to a specific suit, meaning you can play any of the suits for any of the colors. What the colors are telling you on this card is where to change suits. So for instance, if you're looking at a hand that is all navy blue on your card, if you're looking at a hand that's all navy blue, all that's telling you is it's a single suit. So you can play a navy blue hand as all bams or all cracks or all dots, and that's fine, but it's a single suit on those all blue lines. Now, if you look at a line that is, and the word line or hand is what's used for each of these little lines on the card that you can play, and you'll have 14 tiles to win towards that line or hand. So the word line and hand is interchangeable here. But if you look at a line that's green and red, that's two suits, and you change where the colors change. So if it's green for the first two sections, that's a single suit. Maybe you're playing that as dot, and then it changes to red. Maybe that you're going to play as bam, and then it changes back to green. You're going to go back to that dot. So really, it's just indicating the pattern that you're meant to be following. So it doesn't have to be a color on your tile that aligns with the color on the card. It's just telling you where to change suits to follow the pattern on the card. And really, this card, each hand is a pattern to follow. And that's one of the fun things about Mahjong, and one of the reasons that I think we all get so tickled when we're playing it. I think it's really good for your brain to identify those patterns and to be able to pick them out. My husband and I talk about this a lot. We think it's maybe even, as fundamental to humanity as like an evolutionary thing, where you were able to find these patterns in nature if you're hunting for food. And maybe now this is kind of scratching that same itch in our brains of like finding those patterns as you're looking at your tiles that you've been dealt and looking at the different hand options on the card. And again, each year those hands will change. So you will have totally different hands and patterns to kind of build out with your tiles as you go along and you continue to play this game over years. So again, the colors do not indicate a specific suit. They indicate where to change the suit in that pattern of that line or hand on your Mahjong card. Now, something that's important to note, remember in the last video when we were talking about suited tiles, so your bams, your dots, your cracks, versus non-suited tiles, your flowers and your winds. Flowers and winds are always going to be shown as navy blue on this National Mah Jongg League card. Those flowers and winds are shown as navy blue because they don't have a suit. So especially if you look over here in this winds and dragons section, and we'll talk through all the sections in just one second, but you'll notice all the winds are always in that navy blue and all the flowers are also in those navy blue. So the flowers are shown as Fs on your card, and flowers are in every single section of the card. And then the winds similarly are always shown in blue. Otherwise, the colors do indicate, okay, a single suit and then changing to a new suit or changing again a third time. So there are hands on the National Mah Jongg League card that do require all three suits, and that will be shown in all three colors. Okay, Mah Jongg League card is broken up into different sections, and you'll see the same sections kind of year after year. Now, if you go back, historical cards like the 1937 card is going to look so different from these modern 2024 cards. And it's actually super fun if you can get your hands on some vintage and antique cards. I don't have any as old as the 30s, but my girlfriends gave me my birth year cards a couple years ago for my birthday. And that's become kind of my go-to fun thing when I'm throwing a Mahjong birthday party, is to play the birth year cards. It's really fun to kind of see what hands looked like in, the 70s and 80s. It's super fun to see which ones kind of came back around. We played the 1982 the 1982 card for a girlfriend's birthday recently. And what's so interesting is these edition hands from the 2024 card were on there, the same lucky number 7's hands. So it's just kind of fun to see what old hands looked like, how things were different, and kind of the hands that circle back around. Now, that's something you probably don't want to do until you're maybe a little bit more advanced, but just a kind of fun thing is to check out the older cards. That said, or all that to say that there are different sections on each card, and now they're pretty consistent. So you'll see on the top right hand, I guess it would be the top left if you're looking at it, my top right. This top section here is going to be the year section. So that's going to be your 2024 year section. Those hands are all going to be spelling out the year in different ways. So you'll see this top line here is 222 in a single suit. Then your zeros. Remember, we talked about that last week on the video about the tiles. Your zeros are your soap, your white dragon, the dragon that goes with the dot suit. Remember, it can do double duty. So it can be the dragon that matches with dot, but it can also be this zero here. And when it's played as a zero, it doesn't have a suit. And that's important to note because you'll see this hand specifically is starting in green, shifting over to blue, shifting then to red. So it's showing three suits when really you could play it almost as any two suits. And it even says that in the parentheses, which we'll talk about the parentheses in a minute, but those are super important to read because they tell you different ways to make the hand more winnable. So we'll go through that in just 2 seconds. But this section is all going to be different variations on spelling out 2024. So if you are on the deal, you have a lot of these soaps, or you have a lot of 2s and 4s, maybe that makes the most sense for you to kind of look in this section. So really that's the whole goal. Once you get your tiles on the deal and you start to exchange tiles in the Charleston, and we'll go over all of that in future videos, but as you're looking at your tiles, you're not necessarily looking for a specific line or a specific hand. You're really searching for what section should I play in right now. So maybe you have a lot of even numbers, then you're gonna play this 2, 4, 6, 8 section. So these are all even numbered hands. So you're gonna see 2, 4, 6, 8. You come down, maybe you're doing 2, 4, 4, 6, then 8, all kind of in different suits. But over and over again, you're gonna find that that's all even numbers. So if you find that in your tiles that you've been dealt or that you've received during the Charleston, you have a lot of even numbers, 2, 4, 6, 8 hand is where you're going to be looking in that section for your hand as you start to gather more and more tiles. So as we move down, we get into any like number. This is the first place that I wanna point out. You don't have to play every hand as it's written. So you'll see if you look closely, and I know it's kind of hard in this format to really see the hands on the card. So if you have a card in front of you, pop that out. I think that would be maybe beneficial for you to look at the card while we're going through this if you have one. If you don't have one, you can order them from us at southernsparrow.com and we get them direct from the National Mah Jongg League, or you can order direct from the league that then will put you on their mailing list to get like their little newsletter each year. Sometimes that has interesting tidbits on updates on rules, but it does take 2-3 weeks to receive those cards when you order from the league versus if you order from our website, they go out the next day. Anyway, this any like numbers section. So you'll notice each of these hands is shown as all ones, but you can play that with any like numbers, meaning even though it's shown this top line as flower, 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 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, right? Switching suits there, you'll see you're gonna do your flowers, you'll do a single suit ones, a second suit, and then a third suit. You can certainly play that as it's written with your ones, or you can play it with any like number. Maybe on the deal you find that you have a lot of 8s in all of the different suits. Then maybe it makes sense for you to start collecting 8s as much as you can and play any like number with those 8s. So it really can be any like number as long as you're following the pattern. So you can't play it as 7s, 8s, and 9s. You would need to play it as 8s, 8s, 8s. And you're switching suits where the colors change. So in this top line here, you'll see you have 4 flowers. Then we have a single suit of 3 numbers that all match together. So in the example that we've been giving, we've been playing it as 8s. So you would play it as, let's call this 8 dots. You'd have 3 of those. Then you'd come over here and you'd have 4, let's say 8 bams, 4 8 bams, and then you'd have 3 8 cracks. So that would complete the full hand for you there. So you really are just matching the pattern, following the pattern on the card with what you're building on your tiles. And as soon as your whole rack matches what you see here on the card, then you win and you yell, Mahjong! And you get to put up all your tiles. And then you'll say, I was playing the first line in any like numbers. And you'll show your tiles and all your girlfriends around the table will say, oh, yep, that checks out. That's a Mahjong and you've won. Or they may say, oh, can't have a joker in that pair, or oh, you can't do this, or oh, you don't quite have it, in which case then unfortunately your hand would be dead. But we're all just learning here. So sometimes I think it's okay to end up with a dead hand if it teaches you a lesson that you take through to all of your Mahjong games in the future. Gosh, I know this is going really slow to go through each of the sections. Following any like number, you have these addition hands. This year they're the lucky 7s. And you're, again, just matching that pattern. You'll notice these are in all blue. Last year, they were all 3 suits, the addition hands. I cannot tell you how many times, I can tell you, it's been 3 times this year on the 2024 card that I have killed my own hand by declaring Mahjong on a 3-suit exposure for these addition hands when they're now this year a single suit. So when we first got this card, I was playing it incorrectly. So you really do have to pay attention to the pattern. Even if you're an expert like me who's made this her whole life, you can still mess up. And that's kind of the fun of getting the new card in April is the people who've been playing for years and years and years will still be surprised by what they see on the card. Let's get into this middle panel here. We have quints up top. Quints is a section of the card that I will say, if it's your first 5 games playing Mahjong, don't play that section. it's a little tricky in the sense that it requires 5 of a kind. And as we learned on the last video, each suited tile, you have 4 of a kind. Each wind tile, you have 4 of a kind. So you will need to have those jokers to make those 5 of a kind sections of each hand in the quince section. Let's now talk about the consecutive run section. Now, if you're a brand new player to Mahjong, this is a section that I really encourage new players to get familiar with the hands here. I think that they're very easy to build because the patterns are very intuitive, right? We all know how to count up and down. Now, something that's important to note, if you're coming to Mahjong as a new player and you've played cards for a long time, maybe you've come across, Gin Rummy or some other card games where you're building out little runs that are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's just a single card of each of those as a run. That doesn't really happen very often on modern day National Mah Jongg League cards. You will see more of that on the vintage cards like we talked about, but you're always going to be having kind of these groupings. So maybe it's a pair and then a pung, which is 3 tiles that are the same. And then it's a Kong, which means 4 tiles that are the same. So it's always going to be a group of tiles in each part of your hand. It's very, very rarely going to be a group of singles, which would be that like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And who knows, maybe the league will surprise us next year and we'll get that. But I would say if you're brand new to the game, this consecutive run section is a really great place to start. This top line here is a single suit, right? So you're going to be showing 1s, then 2s, then 3s, then 4s, then 5s, or you can play the other side of the line and play it as 5s, then 6s, then 7s, then 8s, then 9s. So you're really just following the pattern again. And oftentimes on the card, you will see that there's a different left and right version of each hand. And that's, again, just to give you a more winnable way to play it. Now, that top line there, it does have to be those numbers, but pretty much every other section, every other line in the consecutive run section can be played with any number. So this second line here, and I hope you can see this, you'll see it's shown as 1, 2, switch suit, a different dragon, they call them opposing dragons, and then back to the first suit, 3s and 4s. Now, you can play this. It'll tell you in those parentheses we talked about, any 4 consecutive numbers in any one suit, Kong, remember Kong is 4 of the same tiles together, Kong opposing dragons, meaning it's going to be a different suits dragon. So you can play this as 1, 2 dragons, 3, 4, or you can play this hand as 5, 6 opposing dragon, 7, 8. So you're just matching the pattern. So let's say in this example, we do play it as 5, 6, dragon, 7, 8. You're gonna have 2 5s, 3 6s in the same suits. You're gonna change suits for those 4 dragons and go back to the first suit for 3 7s and then a pair of 8s. And a reminder here with these pairs, jokers cannot be used in singles or pairs, and you cannot call for a single or pair unless it's the final tile you need to Maj. So just be careful as a new player approaching those lines or hands that have singles and pairs in them, because you need to be aware that, especially if your group does not play with blanks, it's going to be more difficult for you to complete those singles or pairs because you cannot use a joker there and you cannot call for it unless it's your last tile you need to win. But I do love this consecutive run section for a new player. Again, read those parentheses. The vast majority of the hands here, you can play them in any suits that you like as long as you're following the pattern, and in any numbers that you like as long as you're following the pattern there. Now down below here, we have the 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. This is kind of the opposing section to that even section we talked about earlier. This is gonna be odd numbers. And in this section, it really is, I think almost every single hand in this section is going to be the numbers as they're written. So there's no kind of playing around with those numbers in this section. But again, if on the deal you have a lot of odd numbers, this is a great section to go for. You really are just identifying, what do I have a bunch of? What feels good to me? Maybe you see like, oh, I have a lot of odd numbers, but I also have a lot of consecutive numbers. And I have the same tiles towards kind of either odds or consecutive, then you just make a choice of what you kind of feel like playing that day, but really identifying that section. And if you can identify it on a deal, what section, not what hand you're playing, but which section, then you're going to have a much higher chance of winning the game. The faster you can come to a section and be collecting tiles towards that section, the easier time you'll have completing one of the hands in the section. So let's just finish out the sections here. On this right-hand side panel, the final panel, we have our winds and dragons hands. So that's where you're going to see all of the different winds. You see a little bit of dragons in this 2024 card. For the year of the dragon, there's not a lot of fun dragon hands, but there's a few. So if you have a lot of winds and dragons on the deal or after the Charleston, maybe go for that. The thing about winds, especially with new players, if your whole group is new, I find that a lot of players feel nervous to play the winds sections. I don't know why, but remember, there's 4 of every wind in the same way that there's 4 of every suited numbered tile. So you are just as likely to get those winds hands completed as you are the numbers tile. And especially if you see a bunch of winds coming through in the Charleston, then you can kind of anticipate that nobody else is sticking with winds, and you might have a good chance to go for winds if you have some of those in the tiles you were dealt. Over here you have the 3-6-9 section. It's just like it sounds, 3-6-9s. This is another section where it's mostly as written. I think there's one opportunity, maybe 2. There's 2 opportunities to swap it out where a specific hand, this second line here is shown with groups of 3s and 3s. You can play that as 3s or 6s or 9s, but again, it would have to be 6s and 6s or 9s and 9s. You have to follow that pattern. Finally, down here, this is the singles and pairs section. I would avoid this section as a new player, especially if your group does not play with blanks. It is an advanced section. You can see that from the point value associated. So there's a point value associated with every single hand on this card, and you'll notice all of a sudden those point values are really, really high in that singles and pairs section. It's because those hands are really, really hard to build out. So the higher the point value, the more difficult it is to build that hand when following strict National Mah Jongg League rules. Now, having blanks in your gameplay, if your group chooses to play that way, as most of my groups do, that does open these hands up for you a little bit. But Mahjong purists, American Mahjong purists will say, these hands are hard for a reason and they're really meant to be played as advanced players. So take that little as a little thing to consider. I would say play 10 games before you try to approach this, unless you have most of the tiles on the deal and you guys are playing with blanks, then ignore me on that particular front. But those are the sections. Let's talk through a couple more things. The X's and the C's. So we talked about how there's a point value, and the point value kind of indicates the difficulty of the hand. Where you see the letter X next to the line, that is telling you whether it is an exposed hand, X for exposed, or you'll see the letter C, and it's typically on the higher point value hands. That means that you're playing that hand closed or concealed, meaning if you're playing an exposed hand, then you can call for tiles and show them on top of your rack. If you're playing a concealed hand, you cannot. It's more difficult. You won't be able to call if someone discards a tile towards the hand that you need if you're playing a concealed hand. So keep that in mind. And I would advise, if you're new to the game, especially if your whole group is new to the game and you're just getting a lot of games under your belt so that you can feel more comfortable with the gameplay and the flow of it all, I would say ignore this exposed versus concealed. Play everything as exposed at first. Because it does make it easier to make those hands and to get your mahjong. But as you get better and better, I want you to be aware of what those mean, especially if you start playing with groups that aren't your, best friends or aren't your home group. You're going to go out and your neighbors invited you to go play with her long-standing group. You want to make sure that you know, okay, that's a concealed hand, and maybe even ask, do you guys play concealed hands as concealed, or do you play them exposed? Because some groups, I am in a group that they play every hand as an exposed hand, just because it's a very social group and they wanted to make it a little bit easier. So that's a house rule that some people will establish, kind of like playing with blanks. And so just kind of be aware of that as a rule. And I would say play the first 10 times that you've played this game in its entirety. Play it as every hand is exposed. Avoid the quint section, avoid the singles and pairs section in those first 10 games, and then come back to the real following of the rules as they've been prescribed when you have the gameplay and the patterns of it all kind of under your belt a little bit more. So that's how to read the card. Again, be sure you're reading these parentheses. It will make it easier for you to win the card. The 2024 card is a very, very winnable hand, or winnable card. I am not the statistics expert that some other Mahjong players are, but I did see when this card first came out, somebody put together like all the different ways that you can win the 2024 hand versus the 2023 hand, and I think they said something like 500 some odd ways to win on 2023's card versus nearly 800 ways to win on the 2024 card. So if you're just coming to the game, this card is an awesome one to learn on. Now, what is the best way, in my opinion, to learn this card? Play a lot. But if you can't get together with your girlfriends all the time, or you don't have a group that's playing regularly yet, I would say try to find that. But you can play at home just by, dumping your tiles out, or, if you have them in a tile bag, reaching into that bag, pull out 13 tiles as your deal and kind of get them organized. On the deal, I like to organize my tiles by suit and then by number. And then I like to start to find my section. So if you're learning this game and you're wanting to get used to this card, play as much as you can. And if you can't play and you want to just work on your card, then deal yourself 13 tiles and get them organized, and then see, okay, what section would I go for? And then do that a bunch of times, and it'll help you to identify the patterns that you're seeing in your dealt tiles and match them to patterns that you're seeing in these lines on the National Mah Jongg League card. I hope that you find that helpful. I know it is a lot of information, and when you're learning this game, it can feel really overwhelming, but if you stick with it, it really is such a great game. It's so good for your brain. It's so good for your social relationships, and there's a reason people have been playing it for over 200 years. So stick with it. Try to get a group together so you can play. Again, the best way to learn is with an instructor in person, and if you need one, you can find them on our site. I'll link it in the description below, and I'll also link where you can order these cards from us and where you can order them from the National Mah Jongg League. And let me know if y'all have any questions, and we'll answer it in the next video. Thanks so much.